What's going on, everybody? James here from Artificial Entertainment, and today we're going to be continuing on with the Dynamic Parkour Trace System full setup series, and we're going to be taking a look at the setup for the low jump actions. So let's go ahead and dive in. Alright, so we are back in the project that we've been using in the setup series so far. I have modified the map here a little bit. I removed a little circular spot here and added a couple of low jump objects here. And the setup for this is actually going to be very, very simple. It's going to be a pretty quick video because these are probably the most simplistic of all the actions because they follow the same principles as pretty much all the other ground actions that we've set up thus far. And realistically, there's only two different variants. There's the onto and over type that can be selected. So let's go ahead and take a look at how these are set up. So the first thing we're going to need are going to be low jump animations. So I did, just as before, I've gone and grabbed a couple of animations here. And, as usual, the only thing I've done is just, assigned it to my skeleton and made sure it had root motion. So, this is going to be the step onto animation here. And this one's going to be the kind of like step over the object. So this is kind of what these look like. Now, you can use any animations you like. As I say in all of these videos, I'm just using these for example. But anything that has that similar look, you can use it because the system will ultimately define how it moves. From there, it's just making sure that the animation's look is going to be proper. So with these two animations here, we're going to go ahead and just select both of these with shift click, and then we're going to right click on either one, create, and then create the anim montage here. And we're just going to go in and right away start setting these up here. Now, if we go ahead and we open up, we'll do the step on first. So this would be kind of like the equivalent of like a low mantle, essentially, but he's just kind of stepping onto something that's a little bit higher up than his current position. So this would be good for like when you're running and you've got maybe like a little ledge here, something like this. That'll probably be about the use for it. I did find more than a few instances where this particular action was useful, so that's why I threw it in there as an additional option. But to get this set up, the first thing we're going to do is, as usual, add the new notify track, right click, go to notify state, and click on motion warping. Put this in the beginning, and we're going to look at right around where, we don't want to look at when his foot plants, but maybe something just before it. And we'll put this right about here, and with this highlighted, go up to the anim notify details section here, under root motion modifier, take the warp target name and name it to warp 1. Now, as we've discussed, is that in all ground actions, well, majority of ground actions, some of them that does adjust because it was needed to apply for like a location adjuster. But for the majority of actions, warp 1 is height, warp 2 is depth, warp 3 is land, warp 4 is miscellaneous. So we want to make sure that he's going up to right around the height point of the thing that we're trying to jump onto, right about here. Now, we also want to make sure to ignore z-axes, and then we're going to right click, add notify state, and then add another motion warping window. And we're going to kind of line these up so that way it goes from here into the new window. And we're going to look at when his root bone, his center, aligns with his foot position, which is be right about here, I'd say. Now, we can always adjust this later. This is just getting the initial setup here. So now with this one, just because this is a landing position, we're going to name this one to warp 3 on the warp target name up here in the details panel. Now, we're going to make sure to, again, uncheck ignore z-axes and leave the warp rotation checked. And then we're going to right click again, add notify, and then we're going to do the reset parkour action. So we've got our two windows here, first to get us up to the height point, and then to get us to our land point, and then we're resetting back to our standard movement type. Now, speaking of standard movement types though, we do want to make sure that instead of falling under the reset parkour actions details window here, that we set this drop down in the movement mode to walking, because this way it'll actually put us in a walking state rather than a falling state. Now, I do notice here that this is actually a better position probably for him to be able to be more landed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of modify the position a little bit. I'm going to take it so that way it moves to right about there, and then I'll move this up. Now, we'll probably have to adjust it, but again, I'm just setting up the baseline here. Now, we're going to go to the other animation here, the step over, and we're going to do the same thing here. So we're going to add notify track, right click, add notify state, motion warping. And then we're going to look at right around where his foot plants onto the object. Should be right about there, I would say. And then in the details panel here, we're going to open up the root motion modifier. And the warp target name, we're going to name this to warp 1. You can also use warp 2 if you'd like. This way you can get maybe a little more forward to the object. It really depends on, how you want it to be set up. But for this example, we're just going to use warp 1. Now, we are making sure to uncheck the ignore z-axes. And then from here, we're going to right click, add notify state, motion warping, and we're going to look at when he kind of gets to a land position, which would be right about here. So we'll take that and put this right here, and warp target name in the details panel under the root motion modifier is just going to be warp 3, because we're going to use this as the landing location. Unchecking ignore z-axes, keeping warp rotation checked, and then we're going to go right click again, add notify, and reset parkour action. And just like before, we're going to make sure to set the movement mode here from falling to walking. So now we have our two montages set up here. So now we're going to go to our character and set up the elements that allow it to be able to use these actions. So we're going to go to third person, blueprints, BP third person character. At least that's where my character is currently located. And then in the my blueprint section under interfaces, we're going to open up the panel here. And then under action events, we're going to grab the low jump action, just double click and bring the event into your graph. Now, we're going to bring it over to where all of our other action events are over here. And just like what we've been doing, we're going to highlight the play montage in the mesh with a little box select here. And then Control D and duplicate it. Hook these execution pins up. Pull off the montage and get a select node. Perfect. And then hook up the low jump action type enum here into the index. So this way we can use whatever selected action it has as the selected animation montage for it to play. And then from here, we just need to put our montages in. So I'm going to go back to my animations folder here, tutorials, animations. All right, so I got my two montages here. So we get the step on and the over. So the over is this one, and then the on is this one. Perfect. So we'll compile, save, and we'll pull up the character here, make it a little bit bigger. And now all we need to do is go to the dynamic parkour trace system here. Under the ground action settings, low jump action settings, allowed low jump actions, or low jump allowed actions actually. We're going to make sure that over and onto are both selected. Now this is only if you're using both. You don't have to have both selected. I'm just saying that, you know, what I'm doing here. Now the one thing that is very important though is this value here, the max jump over length. So essentially this value controls very similar if you have used the long vault action. It works in a very similar way where 120 units is basically like one cube and like 2 squares in, maybe a square and a half, something like that. That's going to be about what that is. So that's going to be how far he can jump is right about that. Anything beyond that is a forced onto action. So something like this, he can jump over it. Something like this, he has to jump onto it. So just so that way you understand what this value is going to control, it's exactly the same as the vault over action. So we're going to set this to around 120 for right now, and, you know, we'll just kind of leave it at that. Now, let's go ahead and click play now because we've put our montages in. We've created our animation setup. So if I go ahead and click the space bar there, you can see that he kind of jumps onto it, but there was a bit of an issue there. He kind of jumps over it, but it's not really jump over it. He just doesn't land properly. And I did this purposefully so that way I can show you guys an issue that drove me nuts for a while until I realized that it was kind of an issue with motion warping. It's not an issue, I should say, just something that's unexpected. So for these types of actions here, for the step on, for example, if we open this up here, you can see that I've kind of made it so that way it stops later in the montage here. Sometimes if you ever get this type of situation, what you can actually want to do is go back to kind of what we had before. So I'm going to pull this back to right about when he kind of just gets almost to his landing position. And then I'm going to go ahead and just pull this back, and I'm going to look at where he gets to a land. So right about there. I'm going to pull this way back here like this, line up the reset, and then we're going to go into the blend out time and set this to 0.1. Now, what this is essentially going to do is make it so he goes to the location faster, and he's going to snap to that location a little better. You can see that now we're actually jumping to the location. Now, he could be going up a little bit higher, you know, when he gets to that location. So something we can easily do to adjust that would be to just go into the offsets. So we open up the dynamic parkour trace system here, action offsets, low jump actions, and then the jump onto warp 1. We'll set the up and down to maybe we'll add 20 units to it. So he kind of goes a little bit higher up and then he lands on it, something like that. You know, we can modify the speed a little bit. You know, he's probably moving there a little too fast, but this is where we can modify things and change how it behaves. You know, maybe if we push the warp window up so he goes to the land location a little slower, but not, towards the end there. That's actually a little bit better. It's got a better look to it. Kind of stops a little bit, makes it so that way you have to restart. But this is where just play around with the motion warp window and your animation, the blend time. All of this is going to make a big difference in how it filters out in the end. Because essentially all the system is doing is sending certain settings. It's setting them to, like, for example, movement mode is being set to flying, collision capsule is being disabled for certain collision types, rotations are being disabled, certain elements that are just things that would be problematic for the way the system is handling the character's movement. All of this is being adjusted during actions. So in order to ensure that everything gets reset after the fact, that's what this notify is doing, is calling back to just this certain execution that's resetting everything back to its default values. And then these are moving the actor from point A to point B during the animation's time frame. So if you ever have issues where you're getting like it's not switching or ending correctly, or it's not doing, 9 times out of 10, you just need to adjust your blend time and adjust maybe your motion warping windows. I'm going to be doing a video on debugging just to go over this a little bit more, but this particular action I found to give the most consistent, like, bounciness for some reason sometimes. So this was a way to be able to resolve it by just adjusting the windows and then also adjusting the blend out time. So now that we've looked at the jump onto action, let's take a look at the jump over action. So this one actually looks pretty good. I would say that we could probably maybe adjust to this landing position a little bit, make it so he's a little smoother on his land. But overall, I would say that looks pretty good. And that's really it. Now we've got the step onto and over actions inside of the game. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about, or just note, I suppose, really quickly, is that this value here, the max jump over length, this is going to be influenced in the same way the vault over is. So basically, if anything is longer, then let's say, for example, if we go into the primary system settings here, and we go to the object classification options, and we look at the object top length obstacle. So this is what defines an obstacle. Anything beyond this is now a platform, and that's what it's using to assess its original format of action type. However, you can use this value as a buffer under the ground action settings, the one that we were just talking about under low jump action here. So this here is going to control the sprinting value. So whenever you hit the sprint key, it's going to allow you to jump over this. So I just wanted to note that there is a way to be able to set the input dynamically. However, one thing to note is that sometimes it's better to set the jump over length to whatever your max distance is. So like this should actually be, I think, 60. Because realistically, when you're using these types of jump over type actions, a lot of the time what you're going to be doing is jumping onto something like this, for example, or you're going to be jumping over some sort of ground clutter or rock or something like that. You're not really going to be doing anything that's going to require a lot of dynamic input a lot of the time, at least not in the testing that I did. I did try to use a bunch of environments and stuff that I had just for testing and seeing how it interacted with the world. But if you do find that you want something more dynamic, you can use the sprint key and you can use this jump over length and set the value a little bit higher. And whenever you're sprinting, as long as it's within this length, it will go ahead and choose the action. So, but that's really it, guys. That's the low jump over, low jump onto. So with all the ground actions taken care of, we're going to be going into the climbing setup. So we're going to be looking at blend spaces. We're going to be talking about how to use the climbing points, the way the climbing system registers information, all that good stuff. So I hope you guys are excited. I know I am, because I almost forgot about this video, which is why it's being thrown in the middle. I know in the last one I said, hey, we're going to be doing climbing. Well, I wanted to make sure that I actually went through every single action. So as much as the low jump actions are pretty simple, well, it's all part of the system. So now that we got this out of the way, next one is going to be climbing, guys. So I hope to see you there. But until then, stay tuned. And as always, stay animated.